Hi, everyone. It's Amanda with a quick little intro. Welcome to the Nuance Needed podcast. Today, Sam and I are really excited because we have Kimberly Quinlan, who has been one of my favorite OCD experts, therapists to follow. She's been on social media for forever. She's also the host of Your Anxiety Toolkit podcast. And what I really love about this episode is that Kimberly talks about her recent experience with developing OCD after she experienced PTSD. And it's a really interesting story because she went from being an expert to suddenly having it. And in this episode, we get real and raw. We talk about intrusive thoughts, what social media gets wrong about OCD, and what recovery actually looks like. I also share a bit about intrusive thoughts that I had after having my daughter, and we dig into why OCD attacks what you value most. I'm so excited for you to hear this episode. And as always, one of the best ways you can support the show is by rating, reviewing, liking it. We read all your reviews or share it with someone in your life who you think would benefit. All right, let's get into it. Hi, welcome back to the Nuance Needed podcast. I'm Amanda.
And this is Sam.
And we're so excited today because we have the one and only Kimberly Quinlan here.
Thank you for having me. Yay.
Yeah. I mean, you are like the original, I feel like, OCD internet, Instagram expert. I feel like at least that's I joined Instagram and you were already like the OCD queen of Instagram. I feel like in 2017, 2018, you were probably on there before then.
Yep. Yeah, around that time. Yeah. So that's nice. I love being a queen. That sounds fun. I'll take it.
So, yeah, we're here to talk to you all about OCD and anxiety. But if people don't know your background, can you dive in a little bit to like what you do, your podcast, and, you know, your specialties?
Yeah, so I have a private practice in Calabasas, California, Los Angeles. We specialize in OCD and OCD-related conditions. I also have a whole separate passion project, which is CBT School. That's where I have courses for people who cannot access, specialized care for OCD and OCD-related conditions. So I work part-time in both. I have a podcast called Your Anxiety Toolkit, which is, again, just a free platform where I talk about the stuff that shows up in therapy with my clients, a lot of mindfulness, a ton of self-compassion. Yeah, it's just a bit of fun and silliness, but hopefully really helpful, really you could take it and put it to practice right away.
How did you, Kimberly, become interested in this? Do you have any connection to OCD?
It's an interesting question. I wanted to treat panic disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted, when I came out of my master's degree, I was looking for anyone who would teach me how to treat panic. And the only place that would ever give me any kind of experience was at an OCD center. Mm-hmm. And I immediately loved it. Now, I personally had an eating disorder. But as soon as I met people with OCD, I was like, these are my people.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't ever feel super like the eating disorder people were my people.
Yeah.
But the OCD people were my people because I felt like my eating disorder had this obsessive compulsive cycle. I would have the fear of gaining weight. Then I would calculate steps and calories and do compulsive exercise to reduce that. It was just felt that way. Mm-hmm. I've always sort of had some tendencies. Only recently did I talk publicly about, I kind of had this in 2022 or 3. I had just recently actually an explosion of PTSD out of nowhere. Literally, as a clinician, I've been in therapy my whole life. Like I've done all of it. And I had an explosion of PTSD and it very quickly escalated into OCD. And thankfully, I could catch it right away and got treated for it right away. So it was an interesting thing for me to think of myself like before OCD, after OCD.
Yeah.
Kind of like, like before Christ, after Christ kind of thing. Like it felt like there was a life before and there was a life after. So it was a ride. And it was so good because it did feel different to an eating disorder. And as soon as it happened, I was like, oh, this is what this is.
Well, and I imagine it like completely shifted the relationship that you had with your clients as well. Not even necessarily like in how you did or didn't do your work, but I think the empathetic factor there shoots through the roof.
It was funny because I didn't tell anybody as I was going. I try for myself to always have gone through it before I publicly share.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But there were times when my clients would be like crying and they'd be like, this is just so hard. And I'd be like, it is really hard. Really hard. And I'd be like, yes, it's very, very hard. And I'd be like, oh my God, I'm in this with you, but I can't tell you I'm in this with you.
And in your head, you're like, in 6 months when I'm in a better place, maybe I'll self-disclose.
Yes. Or there'll be a situation where I just come out of therapy with my OCD therapist and PTSD therapist, and she'd have just had told me, even though I know these things, I need to be reminded. And then I would be like, now might be a time where we really let's do it together. Let's practice being uncertain.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, wow, she's so collaborative. And I'm thinking, I need this help.
Yes. I love that. Yeah. I had like when I had my daughter, I had a big bout of, which is very common. I know women who have kids, like often they I think it's like biological, right? They experience a lot more intrusive thoughts right afterwards. And it's interesting because I remember telling my husband, and I am notoriously not the most, I don't know, careful person. I'm sort of someone who's like, it'll all work out and it'll be fine. And it's sort of like my way of coping with like having anxiety, I think. And my husband was like, well, maybe it's good that you're like really worried about dropping our baby. Maybe it's good that you're very aware. And he is very like someone who's like kind of borderline hypervigilant, like very aware of his surroundings at all times. Like when we're walking or whatever, you know, he like sees everything where I'm just like, la da 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 da. Do you have much experience with working with like moms, and where does it become just like normal postpartum intrusive thoughts, and where does it, I guess, become OCD? I guess how long it takes, the level of debilitating it is.
Yeah, so there is postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety. You're very, very lucky to have a child and not have postpartum anxiety, in my opinion.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
Like that's because it's an incredibly anxious, stressful, you know, so much responsibility, especially if you've already struggled with some hyper responsibility and perfectionism. Like that's hard, right? I definitely had postpartum anxiety. Postpartum OCD is actually a subtype of OCD where people become, again, debilitated by the hyper responsibility of, will I drop my baby? Will I harm my baby? Will I sexually do something inappropriate to my baby? There could be a crossover with more pedophilia obsessions, which happens for some folks as well. And so it can, a lot of people with like health anxiety by proxy. So they're become fixated on every sniffling nose, every action. I've had moms worry about the development of their child and compulsively check the development of their child. It can show up in, again, OCD attacks the things we value. And when you have a little babe, it comes strong.
Well, it's so hard too, because when you have a child, like there's always this fear and thought of, even like I have these thoughts sometimes, like my daughter's like eye has been like randomly swollen and I think it's just a sty and it's like probably fine. But then you're like, oh my God, what if I don't take her to the doctor in time and it is an infection and then she is blind and it is my fault?
Yeah.
Like that's, and you have to like weigh out, is that really a risk? Am I overreacting? When do I go to the urgent care? You know, as a toddler parent, you're like at urgent care every week. And it's a hard line when you feel like I feel a lot of responsibility that obviously I didn't have before, that feels like, oh, you know, she can grow up and if something's wrong with her, it was my fault. And that's like an intense feeling to have.
For real.
Okay. I realize we just dove deep into our personal experiences, But Kimberly, for people who aren't familiar with OCD beyond just like what they've seen in the movies or Khloe Kardashian and CloCD, can we start with the basics? Like, what actually is OCD and what are the subtypes?
Forgive me, I'll just back up even a little more just so people understand. So generally, in order to have a diagnosis with OCD, you need to have an obsession and a compulsion. And that obsession needs to, despite CloCD's whole thing, is it needs to be a obsession that is unwanted.
Yeah.
Creates a significant degree of distress. And isn't in line with their values. It's not what they don't want to be thinking about this. So, and that's what's so important for people to understand as we move into the subtypes is OCD is not the desire and the love to have these thoughts and these ways of doing things. So yes, you need to have an obsession. Yes, you need to have a compulsion. It usually takes up a minimum of an hour a day. And then that obsession could target literally any area of your life. So you could have relationship OCD, the fear that you don't have the right way to love somebody. You might have just right obsessions, which is when things don't feel right. Like, so it might be a moving target. Today, let's say this hanging here, that feels fine. But then there'll be another day where it doesn't feel right. And I have to kind of move it a little or, until it feels right. And that's the compulsion. The moving of it is the compulsion. It might target your religion or your spirituality where you feel like you have to pray a certain way or you need to do these repetitive neutralizing behaviors. It might show up as sexual obsessions. An example might be, let's say, if you are heterosexual, you might have the intrusive, repetitive, unwanted, distressing thought that, what if you're not a heterosexual? Maybe you're gay. If you're gay, you might have the intrusive thought of, maybe I'm heterosexual. How would I know? How would I get certainty on that? I could go on and on. There are so many different ways in which this shows up. Harm OCD is another huge one. Let's say you're, again, chopping apples with your kid. It's summer. You're ready to go to the pool. You're cutting up watermelon and all the fruits. And all of a sudden you have an intrusive thought. What if I use this knife to stab my child? Again, unwanted, repetitive, distressing. And then you immediately, of course, because you love your child, you drop your knife. And you're like, I never want to touch a knife again. The avoidance of that knife is actually the compulsion. So it's very nuanced, to use your title, and it's very specific to different people. I've never seen an OCD case that's identical.
And what is the line, sort of, because I feel like on TikTok these days, right, everyone says that they have intrusive thoughts. Like, where is the line? I guess I'm asking two questions, right? You can have an intrusive thought or have intrusive thoughts and not have OCD. And then you can also have not intrusive thoughts, but think that they're intrusive thoughts. So maybe let's start with, what is the difference? What is an actual intrusive thought?
Let me give you another example which might resonate for folks with and without OCD. Is I used to have a client who had really bad harm obsessions about children. And she kept this a secret to everyone, including her husband. She was so terrified to tell anyone. She was in the medical field. Of course, a lot of people get reported for this kind of stuff when they don't understand it. This is why it's so important that we understand it. So she would have an intrusive thought the minute she saw a kid, and it really would be whatever is in the area. So if she was with a kid and there was a shovel, her brain would create an intrusive thought that she was going to cut that kid's foot off or whatever. And this is so distressing, right? She's just they just don't stop. They come no matter where I am. The minute I see a kid, if there's a car and a kid, I have a dream that I'm going to run the car into that kid. Or if I have my water bottle in my hand, I have the thought I'm going to hit them over the head with the water bottle. It's nonstop and it's creative, right? It's really very creative. And that was her experience. Once she was at the beach with her husband, and her husband looked at her and a bit shocked, and he goes, there was like this plastic bag rolling across the sand.
Mm-hmm.
You know, someone had brought their lunch and left it there. And he kind of judged himself. And then he was like, oh my God, I just had a thought that I put that plastic bag over that kid's head.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, oh, you have no idea. You know what I mean?
Wow.
But I think that's the difference, right? Between someone with OCD and someone without, is we all have them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We all have had them. I've had them with my kids and so forth. But when it becomes OCD, there's sort of this line that it gets crossed where it's, like I said, it's repetitive. They don't stop, right?
Yeah.
And your experience, if you don't have OCD, is a little bit like, oh God, that's weird. Oh goodness, that would be terrible. For someone with OCD, it's like, my life is ending. Like, this is so bad. This is so intolerable. I feel so dysregulated. I cannot go back to focusing on enjoying this beach. This is all I think about now.
Mm-hmm.
And we do know, based on the brain, that there is sort of the brakes of the brain. There's a weak brake system. So your brain just keeps throwing these thoughts out. So I think for people on TikTok is, they might be having intrusive thoughts. They might be scary. But the difference is the folks with OCD, it's brutal. It's, again, over an hour a day, and that they cannot withhold the urge to engage in compulsive behaviors to reduce or remove them.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you emphasized the impact that it has on daily functioning, because I think that's the element that's missing from so much of the self-diagnosis, right? Like, we each individually have symptoms of almost anything, right?
Yes.
It's why in grad school they tell us, like, don't read the DSM, or you're going to be like, I'm the most mentally ill person that's ever lived.
Yes.
The key distinction, and this is what I tell my clients as well, is that it has to be daily, pervasive. It impacts your ability to live your life the way you want to, and not just momentarily, like we're talking about all day.
Right.
For extended periods of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it causes impaired functioning.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's a terror in it, and we know OCD to be what we call the uncertain disorder, right? So some people will like use that the story I told you. He was like, "Oh my gosh, that was weird. I would never do that."
Yeah.
Right? Whereas the person with OCD goes, "Oh my gosh, what if I want to do that? What if I do it?"
Yeah.
And then it becomes this nagging, painful uncertainty that does not leave them alone.
So in terms of recovery, right, I'm like very familiar with, exposure and response prevention and some of the ways that people work through it, and sort of the idea of, right, the more you perform those compulsions, whether they're mental or actual physical compulsions, the stronger those thoughts get.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of recovery, let's say someone's gone through that and you would say that, they're doing well. And I'm sure this is a huge wide range, so maybe this isn't even worth me asking. But how would someone who is like sort of recovered from OCD be different from someone who just has like the random intrusive thoughts, like I'm going to jump off a cruise ship? Like, I would imagine that they can't ever quite get back to our normal the example of the husband's normal reaction about the bag, but what does it look like?
There's a range, actually. So recovery can look very different. So this is where I get a little snarky, because there are all these people on social media and just marketing cures, right? Like, you'll never have an intrusive thought ever again. And I'm like, oh, prove it. Like, show me how, and I will literally like put some money into your business, and we will be rich together, right? That, because there is no one way to be recovered. Mm-hmm. It is very much on a spectrum. So I'll give you some examples. There are some folks who I have treated who do go through a treatment, and their thoughts don't bother them anymore. Mm-hmm. They barely ever have these intrusive thoughts. And if they do, they're teeny tiny little blips, and they can act like someone who doesn't have OCD, or the neurochemistry of someone who doesn't have OCD. On the other end of the spectrum, there are folks who are in full recovery. They still have intrusive thoughts, right? They don't like them, but when they show up, they do absolutely nothing about them. And they have learnt skills and strategies on how to return back to what they value, and they're back to their full level of functioning. And then there are folks who are between those two spectrums. Both are legitimate examples of a great recovery. Of course, we want more of the first example. And I would say people tend to be more in the middle, right? They might have, the thoughts might be less loud, they might be less frequent, and they mightn't have that full body nervous system response. And they're able to disengage by not engaging in compulsions. That's sort of what I would see commonly. But again, I want to really stress that's still a really good life. Like that's a really empowered, functional, not you're not debilitated life. But I always say to clients, like, recovery is not the absence of intrusive thoughts. It's really your ability to tolerate them and ride them and still live according to your values.
I love that. What is the line between anxiety and OCD? Because I think that's right. Like, and maybe we can get into like mental compulsions, because I know rumination, right, is a pretty big mental compulsion that really sits in between anxiety and OCD. How do you see their relationship together?
Right. So the jury is out on this one. And I think it depends on how you want to conceptualize it. So some folks conceptualize generalized anxiety and OCD as exactly the same condition.
Interesting.
Right? Because they say that generalized anxiety has an intrusive nature of an unwanted thought that bothers them, that causes them distress, that happens for more than an hour, and they engage in mental rumination or avoidance, or sometimes reassurance-seeking compulsions to reduce or remove that uncertainty. So some folks believe that they're pretty much the same beast.
What do you think?
Well, under the diagnosis, I understand generalized anxiety to be more about general daily events and stresses, like finances, my job, my children, my health, and things like that. And so for me, I believe in the two different disorders, right? I believe I classify some people with generalized anxiety and some with OCD, but I do see some clients come so far to the line where you have to go, oh wow, like the compulsions seem to be more repetitive. And where that line is with OCD, people will seek reassurance or do compulsions even though they've done that exact behavior before. They've been given reassurance, like they've been given a clear, let's sort of use health anxiety as an example. Like you've gone to the doctor and the doctor says it's not cancer.
Yeah.
Right? Someone with health anxiety would be like, but what if the doctor's wrong? And then
don't know.
go back, right?
Yeah.
Or what if I didn't explain this extra symptom? With OCD, it's similar, right? Like the doubting component comes back in and you've got to keep doing that same compulsion. That's more in the OCD land than it is the generalized anxiety. But again, some people come right up to that line, and you're a consultation away from trying to figure out which is which. The good news is the treatment is very much the same. So for me, I don't spend a lot of time going back and forth over the diagnosis. It's more about where are they stuck? What are they not willing to tolerate? How can we get them back to that value-based life while they tolerate the distress or the anxiety or the uncertainty? So for me, that's more the focus.
Well, I really, really appreciate that insight, because I think even in my own personal practice with my clients and my clinical work, I don't get so wrapped around the axle around what is such and such thing called, right? And even with them, they'll come to me and say, I think I have this, or I think I have this. And we'll kind of even explore like, well, what would having the name change for you?
Yeah.
Like what would that even mean? Like if we can just say we're experiencing these symptoms because we also know we're going through an extremely stressful period of life. Right. And we're starting to, as we look back and be reflective, we can notice that this is a this rumination, these compulsions tend to come up when I'm experiencing significant stress. That's the fact, right? Yeah. And so to instead focus on how do we live with this? How do we cope with it? How do we make peace with the fact that we have this tendency to respond to stress or day-to-day life in this way? And I think a lot of people right now, with kind of this surge in self-diagnosis, they're so obsessed with the idea of the identity component that I think these diagnoses can give. And there's a conversation to be had about that. Absolutely. Yet at the end of the day, it's like, well, okay, so now what do we do about it? Like, we have these symptoms. So how do we help you, exactly as you said, like live a value-based life?
Right. And a lot of folks have both.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Especially now, like how so many people are having generalized anxiety. It's scary out there. It's hard. Right. So a lot of folks have both, and they will even say, I can feel a difference between the two, right? Like one OCD is very gripped and very like, you have to do this, and the voice is meaner and more panicked, whereas generalized anxiety is more, there's additional like other emotions that might be going along with it. I mean, that's true for OCD too, I should say, but often there's both.
Yeah. I mean, I can especially think about if you talked about relationship OCD or things like that in the reassurance seeking, right? Like I can absolutely see how those could be confused or be both, or maybe start as anxiety and then, become OCD or something like that. So I think that, makes so much sense. Tell us what a mental compulsion is. Because even I think like when I talk to clients about rumination and stuff, it's a very abstract concept to explain to people.
Yeah. It's hard. I'm so glad you said it's complex, because sometimes
I always feel like the dumbest clinician when I'm trying to explain it to people. So maybe Kimberly, you can explain it better for people.
Well, and let's first address that rumination shows up in many, if not all, mental conditions. Right?
That's a good point.
You could have an eating disorder and ruminate about calories.
Yeah.
You could have depression and ruminate about how your life is not worth living. So rumination is ultimately just, a cycle, a loop of some behavior.
Yeah.
In the realm of OCD, there are specific mental compulsions that people do that are probably apparent in other conditions as well. But an example might be compulsive counting. Before I go there, let me just give you a couple of examples. So you might have compulsive counting. You might have compulsive neutralization, where you are thinking about a positive thought to undo the negative thought, right? You might have mental hoarding, which is where you're taking like a mental photograph or a Polaroid of the situation so you can remember it, so that you don't have uncertainty about what happened. An example is some people don't check the stove. They mentally hoard, which is like they take a photo of the stove in their head, not actually, but in their head.
Yeah.
And they remember seeing it at, how it's like faced up way. It's not like a little to the left or a little to the right. It's faced up. So they're remembering that so that they're not uncertain about it later. So there are many different, I would say between 10 and 15 different ways in which we could do a mental compulsion. Rumination is that more just going over something over and over again, but there are many different ways in which we could do that. And each condition has different ways in which they do it. So each subtype, an example would be like, let's say, relationship OCD. You might mentally check for feelings of love towards your partner. You might mentally check, like for sexual obsessions, you might mentally check for arousal. Am I aroused or not by this thing or this person, right? Another one is mentally praying. So you might mentally pray a certain sequence of things the right way to absolve you of a negative thought or a blasphemous thought you've had if you've had religious obsessions. So there is so many different ways again for OCD, where the compulsions become very complex but very ritualized. Whereas with general anxiety, it's just worry.
Mm-hmm.
Like worry, like, like going into all the possible scenarios, and people do that with OCD. They do it with depression. They do that with eating disorders, many different conditions.
Mm-hmm.
But OCD has these very specific mental compulsions.
Okay, that's really helpful. How do you tell people to not, right? Like the whole point of, right, breaking the cycle in, right, exposure and response prevention or CBT and things like that is to resist doing the compulsion. And I find it really challenging to explain to clients how to not ruminate when people don't feel as though they're doing anything. People feel as though it's just happening to them.
Yes. It's a great question. So number one is, and I'm a CBT therapist, so this is sort of my modality's way of doing it. So that, there are different ways, but when I'm working with a client or any of our staff are working with client, we first want to build some awareness that they're doing it, because it's hard to differentiate between mental rumination and just thinking.
Right.
Like when I take a walk, I'm thinking the whole time. And we could classify that as rumination, maybe because I love to think about work when I'm walking in the morning. And we could say, but you thought about work yesterday, so you're ruminating. Well, no, right? I'm not doing it from a place of anxiety or uncertainty. I'm sort of doing it more in a problem-solving way. So that's important to know. So first I will actually give them a log to log when they catch themselves ruminating, and we will give, or doing a compulsion, mental compulsion, and we'll have specific understanding of what that looks like. And usually it's, are you thinking about your specific obsession?
Yeah.
I just want you to log anytime you're thinking about that obsession. And we want to then look for, are there specific times in the day or places or things that trigger that? And that is going to be a really important, piece of understanding. Once they have a better awareness, then I'm going to do a ton of psychoeducation about mindfulness skills so that they can sort of strengthen the muscle. And I show them my muscle. Like, we have very weak mindfulness skills. Being present is a weak muscle. And so we're going to strengthen that by practicing coming back to the present. I usually will draw a picture. I actually did this on social media. I'll say, like, okay, so here is your day. You're going to follow, if for those people who are watching, we're following my finger. This is thinking. And then mental compulsions is over here. And it's like, like this. And I'll say, once you catch yourself off the line of being present, you just note that I'm thinking and you come back to the present. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? What do you taste? And then your brain is going to go back away and be thinking about things again. That's what our brain is meant to do. And you're going to practice coming back to the present. And let's say, and I'll say to clients, let's actually goal for you doing this about 100 times a day minimum. Right? Actually, you're probably going to be more like 1,000 times a day if you have this condition, but let's shoot for between 10 and 100. And we are going to celebrate you every single time, because this is hard work, right? That even if you can come to the present one time today, I'm celebrating you because you are strengthening a muscle. That's the response prevention part of ERP. If they're really struggling with that, we may encourage them to do a flooding behavior, which is called maybe nots, which is, if your fear is, give me a fear, any fear you have.
Snakes.
Okay. So let's say you're out and you're taking a hike and you're doing a value-based behavior, but you cannot stop this intrusive thought about snakes. You're going to practice that response prevention of staying present and just looking at the trees and the sky and the ground. You're going to have some awareness. Like, I'm not going to tell you to look up and completely trip over your feet. So we're going to do that. And then we might even say you're going to engage in flooding behavior. So it might be, maybe I see a snake, maybe I don't. Maybe I see a snake, maybe I don't. And that will replace the mental compulsion. And it's encouraging them to be uncertain. If their obsessions is really strong, I'm going to have you sing a song to the happy birthday song to replace it. So we are going to sing that you're going to see a snake and the snake's whatever, and you're going to sing it to the sound of happy birthday. And you're going to make it out to be a joke. So there are different ways in which we can practice this. There's more strategy to it than that, but ultimately it's repetition.
I appreciate so much that you just used the numbers 100 and 1,000 in a 24-hour period, because I think it really is making peace with the fact that you will have thoughts all day, every day. It's one of the crazy things about being a sentient being. Like, it's going to happen. And I think there's so much pressure around still experiencing these things even while doing the work.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people feel like they've failed because it's not happening less.
The other piece of this that I get really annoyed with, and I'm so glad you brought that up, Sam, is the physiology and the neurophysiology of a brain is that your people with anxiety and OCD actually have a brake system that's very weak. So there's nothing stopping the brain from bringing these thoughts repetitive. You're not having, if you have OCD and you're listening to this, you don't have these intrusive thoughts because you want them.
Right.
Or because you're a bad person. Your brain literally cannot pump the brakes on these thoughts. So to say you're going to do it once and fix it would be like me saying you're going to, eat less sugar once and not be a diabetic anymore. It's just not how the physiology of the body works.
I think that's so important. I wanted to ask you too about like magical thinking, because I think that's another one that sort of encapsulates both. And I, growing up, was so like obsessed with being perfect that I kind of would let that infiltrate into my thoughts. And I would get very upset and rigid and think that if I thought something negative, it meant I was a bad person. And then it would kind of get, worse and worse because I would get more rigid about it. And it wasn't until learning mindfulness tools, which I learned in yoga, that I was able to like have that visceral experience of I'm not my thoughts, and that like completely changed my life. But it is such an abstract concept to tell. So like I had been told you're not your thoughts probably like thousands of times, but it wasn't until that I kind of had that experience of actually being present that I was able to fully kind of make that connection.
Yeah, I agree. That's a part of the psychoeducation of treatment. It's such a huge piece. We do a thorough psychoeducation part of treatment where we actually help people to understand and have a better relationship with their thoughts and also with their anxiety. And so we will often say thoughts aren't facts. They're thoughts.
Yeah.
Right. But in addition, feelings aren't facts. When you have anxiety, your brain literally is sending the message that doom is approaching. Bad things are about to happen. And so it's kind of hard to avoid and ignore that. It's hard to just dismiss that because you feel irresponsible. You feel like especially if it's about something you love, right? And anxiety and OCD always attacks what you value the most. And so it does feel very it's very scary to not pay attention and treat it like it's really important. But that is a part of the process.
I love that you mentioned that, because I think Sam and I talk about this a lot of kind of, on the age of way too much information and all of us being like flooded and overwhelmed and in a constant state of anxiety. I really struggle sometimes to not check what's going on.
Yes.
Because I have a lot of fear that I will miss something and that something is important and I like won't be aware of it, and somehow it will like directly more impact me if I don't exactly know what's going on. So I think that's such a good point about we want to like we're checking to try to make ourselves feel better and be sure that everything's okay. But the more you do that, the worse it gets.
Yes. And the message we have to really explore gently is if you have, and this is a part of breaking the cycle, is if you have a fear or an obsession, it feels real. But if you treat it like it's real, you reinforce it for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that's a hard cookie to chew on. Like that's no fun to acknowledge, but it is actually the way it works. So if you have something that feels real, if you do respond in that way, you're reinforcing it. So the only job we have is to practice not taking things as real, even though they feel like they are.
If you were listening to this episode and thinking, oh my goodness, I'm really relating to this. Do I have OCD? Do I just have anxiety? Regardless of where you are on that spectrum, my practice specializes in helping individuals with OCD. We use the gold standard of treatment, something that Kimberly talks about here. We use ERP, which is exposure and response prevention, and that is a form of CBT. We also lead, like her, from a very compassionate lens, and we have a lot of therapists who are literal OCD experts. So we would love to help you. We have 4 office locations in the Philadelphia area, 2 in the city, 1 on the main line, and we just opened a new location in Collingswood, New Jersey. We would love to see you there. And we also have therapists in 42 states across the country if you want virtual therapy. We also have medication management, which is something I probably don't talk about enough. We have a psychiatrist, an incredible nurse practitioner. We know for OCD, medication can be a really important tool to help you. So come see us and you can kind of have all your needs taken care of under one roof.
What's hard is I think so many of these skills are technically easy. They're technically straightforward. When we're talking about telling somebody like practice awareness, bring yourself back into your body, accept that this is just a day-to-day occurrence, right? On the surface, I think what trips people up is they hear those 3 things and they're like, there's no way it's that straightforward. But then they also expect it to be quick.
Yes.
Because the steps are simple, they expect that it's going to be quick. But then also I found with some people that I've worked with over the years that because it feels so complex up here, when you give them such straightforward directives of how to approach it, they almost feel like we aren't understanding it professionally.
Yes.
Because they're like, but it is so messy. It is so oppressive. It is so overwhelming. There's no way it's as quote unquote simple as me like bringing myself back to the present moment and just flexing this muscle.
Well, and I think you put the words perfectly, which is it is simple, but it's not easy. And the main piece that as a final, like one of the big pieces of the psychoeducation is this is going to be a pretty standard treatment.
Yeah.
But the thing that will determine success is often willingness to be uncomfortable.
Amen.
Right? And so back when I was first trained in these modalities, we used to, as we did exposures and we would go and face our fear, the client's fears, we used to do a check-in under their SUD scale. For those of you who don't know, it's a subjective units of distress. Like, how uncomfortable are you? And they would go, oh, well, I'm like doing this scary thing. Let's say the fear was, chopping apples. Let's go back. And they'll go, well, it's kind of like an 8 out of 10. And we'd be like, okay, all right, good. Okay, now what are you at? Oh, I'm at a 7. Oh, great. Look at us go. We're doing so great. Like that would be how we would check in. We have now learned that that is actually reinforcing too much attention on the anxiety. And now instead we say, out of 10, how willing are you to be uncomfortable?
Oh, I love that.
Right. And by that, you're reframing the exposure, not to like, ooh, are we getting rid of it or is it coming like that? Instead, we're having a perspective of how willing are you to experience this physiological experience or these mental thoughts? And what can we do to increase that? Because I always say with my clients and in all of my kind of educational materials, we're looking for an 8, 9, and 10 out of 10 of willingness. And that's the piece that no one wants to hear.
Nope.
But that's how you change your brain.
I'm obsessed with that, Kimberly, because I hate the SUD scale. And whenever anyone asks me, then I become super fixated on the number and super fixated on making sure that the number is going down properly.
Yeah, it's not the goal.
To like make sure, like when I've done EMDR and stuff like that, I get really fixated on, well, I haven't come down enough in how uncomfortable I am. So I got to make sure that they can wrap up the session on time. So I have to make sure that I'm down to a 1 or 2 by the end.
No, if a client comes to me, I say this all the time. If a client comes to me after a week and says, Kimberly, you'd be so proud I haven't had one panic attack all week, I'd go, boo.
Yeah.
Right. I'd be like, that's wonderful, but we do not measure your recovery based on whether you had a panic. Yeah. I would love, like, if you said to me I had 6 panic attacks, but I wrote each one of them out and I was so kind and I was so willing, I would be like, you are winning, right? Yeah. Let's go. Look at us. You have made massive progress. And so that's, of course, I'm not going to be like, I hope you suffer. That's not ever my goal. But there is a mindset shift when it comes to anxiety that a big piece of my podcast is to try to help people unlearn what they've been taught about discomfort. Like my thing that I always say is it's a beautiful day to do hard things. Like that's that we have t-shirts with that written on it, because the alternative is like stay calm. You know, what is the saying? Like stay calm and drink coffee.
On.
Carry on.
Calm, carry on.
Yeah. Like for me, it's like, no, we do hard things. That's what this is about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, this was so awesome, Kimberly. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. I hope it was helpful.
Oh
my gosh, it was so helpful. It was so helpful. Sam, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to add?
No, other than I wish we could like attach some CEUs to this, because that's how helpful it felt for me, even professionally and personally. So thank you.
Yeah, so happy to hear it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kimberly. Again, where can people find your work, follow you? I know you also have a workbook.
Yeah, I do. So you can find me at Your Anxiety Toolkit on Instagram. I have a podcast called Your Anxiety Toolkit. All of our online courses, we do have CEUs for a lot of our courses on cbtschool.com. I have a private practice in Calabasas. You can just Google my name, Kimberly Quinlan Calabasas, and it will show up. And I do have a workbook through New Harbinger Publications called the Self-Compassion Workbook for OCD.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you later.
Yeah, thank you.